Hey y'all. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late. Thank you guys for your patience. Um, well, let's talk about building characters, everybody. So, uh, well, first off, for anyone new to the channel, I appreciate you coming by to give it a watch. Um, and yeah, let's get it going. I've been doing improv for maybe about 10 years, I want to say. Somewhere abouts around there. I don't know if I can count the last year, so maybe I'm just shy of a decade. But I've been training with uh, quite a few wonderful teachers, and I've been able to teach for a few years as well, which has been a delight. And since the theater that I normally perform, teach, do all that fun stuff at is currently still closed, I figured I might as well do my thing on here. So let's take it away with instant character creation. So, this is one of my favorite things. And this is applicable to both improv scenes, whether you're doing short form in a game, long form in like a herald or something, and also in D&D. Because as everyone who's DM'd knows, sometimes your players are gonna want to talk to someone that you didn't prepare for, in which case you gotta be ready. So here are some techniques that I have learned that you can use to develop characters immediately. I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between TTRPGs and improv scenes, but I feel like a lot of the muscles, a lot of the skills, they kind of translate back and forth. So, yeah, hopefully you'll get something from this. First off, when it comes to having specific characters in improv, voice is a great way to start. Of course, if you have a great accent that you love doing, that maybe you received a lot of compliments on, beautiful, beautiful. Sometimes you'll be called upon to do that, and you could use that as a starting point. It's not enough to just have a great voice, but if you have a great voice, then you've already endeared yourself to the audience if you're on stage in front of a crowd, or to your players if you're creating an NPC from scratch. It's a good way to differentiate too, because then, say you're in an improv scene. Let's say you're in an improv set, and you end up having to play more than one character that you might end up going back to. Well, if you want to go back to a character, having a very distinct voice gives you that opportunity to do that. Same thing for an NPC. If you have a very distinct accent, then you can have one of those jaw-dropping moments where suddenly maybe you've got a character who has a southern drawl, let's say that. And maybe initially they were very friendly, though there might have been something a little bit off, but the players had kind of ignored it a little bit. And in that case, great, because suddenly you might get through a dungeon and reach that point where You want to, like, you're about to find out who the big bad in this dungeon is, and then you can hear that distinct sound of that southern drawl, and then everyone can have that, oh no, it's him kind of moment. So starting with an accent, fantastic. But if you can't do an accent, that's fine. There are so many more ways you can play with your voice that don't involve needing to do a specific sort of accent. Here are some ways. First off, you can play with pitch. So, if you want to make your characters very distinct, whether you're in a scene or as an NPC, you can pull your pitch down or push it up. If you're speaking in a more like high-pitched sort of voice, then that suggests something about that character. If you're speaking a more low sort of sound, that suggests something else. What that suggests, well, you might be able to play a little bit with that as far as how your players interpret that, or how your scene partner interprets that in an improv scene. But again, it's another great way to differentiate, so that when you have two very distinct characters, when you have two characters there, and maybe there's a little bit of back and forth between them and the players, then they'll know, oh, okay, this person is speaking in a high pitch. This is the singer, and this person's speaking in a low pitch. This person is clearly the Baron. I mean, it allows you to differentiate so that there isn't that confusion. Additionally, you can speak in different tempo. And this is one of my favorite things to play with, because players love to read into characters that speak very quickly. Especially, and here's the thing, is that all these elements, you can mix and match them. And when you do, you can have very, very distinct characters. It's like, you might have one person who speaks very low and slow. But you could also have someone who speaks very low and yet is able to maintain a very quick timbre as far as what they're saying. And when you do that, you're able to, again, differentiate. But again, when you start with these things, it's just a starting point. And as I'm going through all these elements, you don't have to stay with just one as the starting point. You have a lot of different options here. It's all just based on what your preference is. And the more you train these muscles, then you can play around and say, hey, this time I'm going to start with voice. This time I'm going to start with posture. This time I'm going to start with attitude. Though I put the acronym here, VAP. It's mostly just so you could just say it easier, quicker. But I'm leaving attitude for the end because it's my favorite one. It's the one that I can go most in depth with. But we talked about tempo, pitch, accents. Okay, let's jump a little bit into posture. Now, posture. This is something that it's a little bit more performative, and I would say definitely be careful, because everyone has different physical conditions, and I would hate to give you a suggestion of a posture and then suddenly cause like back pain or something. But if you're stepping into a scene, whether it be improv or D&D, a strong way to step in as a very distinct character is to adjust the way you stand, adjust the way you walk. And by that, I mean, like, for example, if you were to picture an older character, not to say that all old characters would be like this, but if you step into a scene a little bit slower, you could even pretend you've got a cane. Then when you do that, then the audience will know, oh, this person has a cane, this person's a little bit slower, maybe they're an older character. It's a good assumption, right? Now, you could also, if you're trying to make a character seem more, maybe more meek, you could have more closed off body language. In which case, maybe there's a slight hunch. Maybe the way they hold their arms, it's just a defensive pose in general. And that speaks a lot as far as what's going on with your character. Now, each of these, like if you were to start with a posture, or if you start with a voice, there are a lot of questions you can ask. But the biggest thing is why? For example, with the very defensive body language, why do they have that? Is this how they normally carry themselves? If so, then maybe right when you first meet that character, you see them in that posture. If it's not, then why are they carrying themselves like that now? Maybe they have a secret of some sort. In which case, we get to play with that and build from there as well. A big thing that you can work with posture, if you have time, like this is less instant as far as D&D goes, because this does take a little bit of build up, but something we do in improv in a scene is we might step into a scene, into the room, with a certain part of our body leading the way. For example, you could pretend that as far as like you walking goes, pretend that there is an invisible plane that you're trying to cross, and focus on one part of your body crossing that plane first. For example, if you were to cross the plane with your forehead first, then it could be a character that is very focused on moving ahead, focused on moving forward. They might move a little bit quicker than another character would, or they might not. They might have a more methodical approach. But you can figure out all those details by experimenting a little bit. If you walk around with leading with your forehead, you might think, okay, how fast am I going now? What am I thinking about now? What is this character feeling right now? And then contrast that. Like I would say maybe walk around for like a good 20 seconds like that, asking yourself those questions, but then you can also adjust it a little bit and say, and I'll put a note of this, walk around with different body parts leading the way. Forehead. And then you could contrast that with, what if as you're walking forward, you're leading with your chest? Not to say that you're going cartoonish, like to specifically make your chest cross the plane, but in imagination land, hold your chest forward a little bit and move forward and see how that makes this character feel. Like how does that make this character feel different from the character who led with their forehead? You can play around with this with different body parts. Forehead, chest, belly, pelvis, knees, and feet. Each of those, you'll find if you try this exercise, each of those gives you a different, distinct feeling as far as the other elements of speed, of how much this character might look around, or how focused they are on the one thing. And of course, you can decide all those elements too. It's just that this is a good way to start off if you're walking into a scene. If you want to use this to develop a D&D character, perfect. Because it allows you, if you wanted to, again, I said this isn't particularly instantaneous like the other ones could be, but if you wanted to, you could think of a character that you'll be playing later, an NPC, and try this. Try embodying these, because once you've done that, you can use this in your descriptions too. Once you've tested out and felt, okay, this is how it feels when your feet cross the plane first versus when your forehead crosses the plane first. And once you have those distinct feelings in your heart, you can describe that and start off with that to branch off into the other elements of maybe stuff they're wearing and the sound of their voice and how they make eye contact with the players. Now, I mean, there are some things you can do in D&D with regards to posture. I mean, generally we're sitting at a table, but for example, whenever I play my Goblin Cleric Piob, who's not the most confident, but really friendly, I always have him in a slight hunch. I started doing it that way, just out of like sheer habit of having played with posture so much already. But from then on, every time I've been on stream, I find myself gravitating towards that. And it's a good touchstone, which I'm going to make a little note, but sitting body language here. I'm going to make a little note about touchstones. But there are plenty of things that you can do when you're sitting at a table to embody an NPC immediately. Like if you got a little hunch, or if you decide to sit a little bit straighter. Because when you do that, your players will feel that. You'll feel that. It makes it a lot easier to take on this character. You might even have a character who's very confident, who, when you become this character, you might do a little lean back, cross your leg, raise your chin as you're talking to the player. And then when you switch back to DM mode, it's like you sit back as you normally do. And then that becomes like another way. Like even if you don't do anything with your voice, you've already done enough with body language to show the players who's talking. And oftentimes when you've changed your postures that dramatically, that affects the sort of voice you use. Someone who has a lot of bravado, who has a lot of confidence, they might speak quite a bit slower because they're confident that whoever is listening is gonna wait and hear what they have to say because they're important enough. Now, we're gonna talk about, well, let's talk about touchstones before we get into attitude. Touchstones, this is something that I learned very quickly from my very first improv teacher, Calvin, who is incredible, like mind-blowingly good. And oh snap, Wesley, hello. It's good to see you, man. So right now we've just talked about voice and posture. I've given the acronym VAP, V-A-P, but we're talking about touchstones now as well. But as far as like creating a character very quickly on the spot, you can play with. I'm just gonna do a very, very quick review here. You can play with your voice. You can start with an accent if you've got one. You can start with a pitch, high pitch, low pitch, middle. You can play with tempo. You can start with someone who speaks very quickly or speaks very slowly, and then use that to inform the rest of the character. And then with posture, it's at the table. There are so many things you could do with your body language of like hunching over a little bit, more defensive versus sitting back and being more relaxed, more comfortable. And you can see how doing that will influence how your even your voice and your attitude end up being as that character that you just made up immediately on the spot. Now, as far as the walking around with different body parts leading the way, I think I've had you try this before, Wesley. Let me know if I haven't. But right now we're on touchstones, and I learned this from my very first improv teacher, Calvin. And essentially what this is, a lot of times if you build a character immediately on the spot, the fear is that you'll lose the character, you'll lose the voice. And so if you have this works best with accents, but you could use it with anything because sometimes it's just a matter of getting in the character's head. But there are certain phrases that we may have gravitated to when we started learning an accent. Like for example, one of my friends, whenever they do their Russian accent, they say the word vodka. And wonderful, Leslie. Okay, cool. Yeah. It's a great way touchstones are a great way to get accents, and they're also a great way to maintain them. Because sometimes if we have the accent for the character in the moment, in that one scene, we got it. But then we might come back to it and then think, crap, I don't know how my mouth made those sounds anymore. In which case, you hang on to that touchstone, whatever that word or maybe a phrase is that brings you back to that voice. Yeah. How's that campaign going, by the way, Wesley? I'm sorry, it's been a long time since we've talked about it. But in addition to that sort of touchstone, of course, you can use your posture too. Because anytime that I want to play a character, there's one character in particular I'm thinking of in a long-running D&D campaign who, every time he shows up, he's just completely cocky. And he has this air of superiority, but he also has like enough power and notoriety to back it up. So when the players run into him, they know not to attack him. And I'll always have like a specific way of talking. And whenever I play him, I always like do a quick look down and then I look back up and smile just a little bit. And that's how I get into that character. So whatever touchstone you want to use, it doesn't matter. Just recognize what your touchstones are so that you can come back to a character whenever you want. Oh no, you lost Irish. Oh man, I'm sorry, Wesley. I might have some notes because I took a dialects class in college, and Irish was one of the dialects that we learned, and they would give us little sheets that would say, okay, from standard American, this is how you get to Irish. These are the sounds that you change. These are like specific letters would change into this sort of sound. So if I find it, I'll send that over to you, Wesley. Because Irish is like one of my faves. I just love doing that voice so much. I mean, I don't do it very well necessarily, but I think at the very least it's distinct enough from my other voices. 12. Oh, whoa. Okay, cool. I dig that. I think like being able to maintain that level of tension where everyone is on edge. Heck yeah, that's wonderful. Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. Oh man. Goodness. Okay. So, finally, I want to talk about attitude, because attitude there are so many ways you can broach this, but I'm going to start with my favorite way, because oftentimes players will just be like, hey, can I check out this store? And it's never the store that you planned for. So one of my favorite things to do, because I didn't plan for it, I'm not going to tell them, because I take it as a personal challenge. So instead of just saying, hey, I don't have that ready, I just do it. But first, and I guess this is more D&D specific right now, but we're going to start with the shopkeep. First off, I'm likely to ask the player, hey, so as you're stepping into the store, let's see, what's the state of your clothes? Like, are you very clean? Is it very pristine? Do you look like someone who's very high class, or do you look like someone who's definitely been adventuring and has like blood-stained pants or something, blood-stained shirt from fighting off like a bunch of wolves? And then they'll describe it, and so then I'm like, okay, cool, roll a percentile for me. And when I have them do that, assuming they're not walking into very distinct districts, because in that case it's so much easier. If there's very clearly a wealthy district, then okay, most likely they're walking into an upscale place. But otherwise, if it isn't very clearly defined, I have them roll a little percentile. Typically higher is more fitting to what they've maybe what they've got on. Lower, it might be they might not necessarily be the desired clientele of that place. And by that I mean, for example, if you've got an adventurer who's clad in sweaty, dirty, blood-stained leather armor, and they've got their sword maybe still a little dripping with viscera, and they walk into this boutique where everything is pristine, and the shopkeep looks at them and immediately has this look of worry. And from there, when you already have that reaction, you have a character you can play already. So I'm putting this percentile to determine if shop is a good fit for a character right now. Because once we have, I typically go high equals perfect, low equals terrible. Oh, awesome, Wesley. Your favorite session you ever ran was completely improv. That's amazing. I'm sorry the player bailed, but man, good work. Good work. Like, I'm always such a big fan of being able to play on the fly, and having players that are willing to go with the flow too. The cultists were incompetent, so I could justify the info the players got, and unbeknownst to me, the low-level cultists in the book actually were pretty incompetent. Perfect! Perfect! I found that a lot of times, when you go with your gut instincts in improv and in D&D, the stars align. And, I mean, sometimes you'll be wrong, but it's fine, because, perfect! See, that's the thing, is like, when it comes to running games or doing a scene, one of my favorite tacks to take is to go into something with utmost confidence. Because if you're the DM and you're doing that, there may be a player or two who knows like that specific enemy or something, but it doesn't matter because you might have your own version of that enemy, and you can play with that with descriptions. And I mean, as the DM, it's your world, it's your characters. The fact that it all lined up, Wesley, that's phenomenal. Okay, cool. I'll get to that soon after I finish up with attitude. But I mean, if you want to type it real quick, that'll give me some time to prepare a better answer. But yeah, I'll answer it as soon as I'm done with this attitude section. But yeah, like oftentimes I'll roll percentile to see if that shop is a good fit, and if it's not, then from there, the shopkeeper's attitude, in the example with the very dirty adventurer, blood-stained clothes, going into the shop, that's very hoity-toity, pristine, very nice, very high class, then the shopkeep is going to be a little panicky. Why are they panicky? That's a good question to ask. Why would they not be amenable to this adventurer? Because we can think of adventurers as being those who may have quite a lot of gold because they were able to take care of some quests, slay some dragons. They may be the richest people in the world, but in that case, the shopkeeper doesn't know that, right? They just see someone who's walking in with blood, dirt, and a sword. The shopkeep might initially think, you're here to kill me and rob me and take all my expensive things. Then you have that, and you can start the interaction off like that. It could just be a, please don't hurt me. You could, I don't have a lot of money in the register or anything. Please, I'm just trying to do my job. And from there, you get to see what your player will do. But right now, you've already established a character that doesn't hold the player's character in very high esteem, but you are able to establish, you're able to set something up so the player has to react if they want to get anywhere with this. And we get to see a little bit of like the character's alignment come into play, or how they operate, because in the face of someone who's terrified of you, the character could take advantage of this and take the money and take goods. but that will of course have consequences. Or maybe the player will be maybe a little more worried and confront this shopkeeper in such a way where they're trying to calm them down, saying, I just want to buy something. Then, again, we get to keep making decisions of maybe that'll calm the shopkeeper down. Maybe you need a persuasion roll to calm them down. Regardless, you have a lot of potential role play right here. Beyond simply, what do you want to buy? It's this much gold, it's this much silver, and then doing that transaction. You can play around a little bit. On the flip side, let's talk about if they rolled high on the percentile with their dirty clothes, blood, and the sword already well worn and used, freshly used. They might walk into a shop where you have a very grizzled veteran behind the counter who takes one look up and down, and I guess depending on how this character holds themselves, if they're maybe a young gun who's gone out and completed their first quest, then maybe this grizzled veteran will see something in them that reminds them of them when they were younger. In which case they could easily be like, hey, new blood, huh? And then you can have a little interaction there. Maybe the shopkeep will give him something for free, but not something huge. He has a business to run, of course, but I mean, that in that case, it could simply be a bonding moment. And maybe the two characters, the NPC and the player, maybe they'll develop a relationship in which the player will keep coming back to this guy because he's a friend. Now, if you're in an improv scene, you could do something similarly in the vein. I mean, you won't necessarily have a dice, but when you step out onto the scene, of course, you check in with your scene partner. You make eye contact, and you see how they're stepping into the scene. What kind of energy they're bringing, how they're looking at you, what they're doing. Because you get to choose how you react to it. If you're going to react to it in a positive way or a negative way. And why. If they come at you and they're super happy and they're about to give you a gift, you can choose to take it good or bad. Because very, very easily, that gift, it could be them coming to give you a gift for your birthday. And you didn't expect a gift. And you could be very happy, like, whoa, cool. Because at the start of an improv scene, most of those details aren't established until they're spoken. In which case, you could be like, oh, cool, you remembered. And then it's up to them. It's like, since you're building together, it's up to them to determine if you two are on the same page, because you could have some beautiful dramatic irony if you're like, you remembered my birthday, and grab their gift, and then they might be like, yeah, I totally did. Or they could be like, yeah, this is totally for you, when maybe they wanted you to give it to your sister, who they've had their eye on. So, again, it's always a give and take, but you have the option. If you want to take it negatively, and they're coming up to you with a gift, you could easily be like, you can't make up for leaving me behind with some gift you got at Walmart, or something like that. That's a lot of information you've just given them. You've just told them a lot of history. You've told the audience a lot of history. And we've established what this scene could be about. In that your scene partner's character might be trying to make up for something they did to wrong you. With that one negative reaction, and backing it up with why, you have a scene dynamic that you get to play with now. So, that's a very quick crash course into using the principles of VAP that I learned from my first teacher, Calvin, where you're using voice, attitude, posture to inform a character. And of course, every step, that's not the end. You start with that one step, and then you can ask why. And some of them are a little more like straightforward than others. For example, if you've got a character who walks in with a posture of having a cane, the why could be maybe they're old and frail, or maybe they were in an accident. Regardless, whatever it is, you can always ask the question why to get more and more and more of your character. So, well, Wesley, if you've got a question, I am ready to take it. Let's see. Let's make sure that I can still see all the chat. Okay, I'll be standing by for your question. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to ask. Whether it be about improv or D&D or both. These two are two of my favorite things in the world, and so I am always happy to talk about them. Okay, well, Wesley, while I'm waiting for your question, I can expand a little bit more on attitude. Because I did say before that there's so many options here. There's so many things you can do here. That it... Okay, there we go. There we go. So I'm more comfortable improving than going through the book, because I have to read every time to make sure I don't miss something in the book. I know it's in the book for balance and story continuity, so I find myself trying to read during the session, but I hate slowing the session down. I see. I see. I think that your first instinct of, oh, if I improv a distance or room and then find in the book I'm wrong, the book no-ands you. So then I need to get back to the book, but I don't want to have to read every time they enter a room. Okay. Well, while you're, and throw off the rhythm, I prep to have an idea, but I can't remember it all. So I do have to read the book, but I need to find a middle ground. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So I run games from modules all the time. That's basically my jam. Now, I've encountered this scenario a ton, and the way I see it is you are in the game, you are the DM, you are the overarching deity of this world. In which case, if you've got a room that you don't quite remember what was in the book, then whatever you say it is, that's what it is. I think of it just like an improv scene, where maybe the vibe you get as you walk into a scene is one specific vibe, but then your scene partner says something else. Well, the vibe that was in your head wasn't verbalized, so it's not the reality. What they said was, and so that's the reality. So, if you, in the book, like if you've read through that section but then don't remember that specific area, that's okay, because you're the god here. So if you get one room wrong, doesn't matter. It's not like the players are going back through the book to check your work. And I'm sure you're doing a lot of adapting for your players too. Like just based on who your players are, what their characters are after. Oh, you find it especially an issue like if you don't know what ranges your players have. Kill people across distances because I make it too... Oh, okay. Okay. Well, in that case, I mean... I don't think that's a huge problem. Because sometimes if you're in a circumstance where the battle conditions are favorable to a player, that can be good. I mean, you're not like I think of it almost like a, oh, this is a chance for that player, that character to really shine. And then the next time you might have an enemy that has studied their battle tactics and is able to accommodate or like account for that and either go farther away or ambush and suddenly be up close. And I think it has a good like push and pull element here. Because you want, I mean, of course you want it to be challenging, but every now and then you want your players to feel like badasses. So that they can be the heroes that they made their characters to be. So, yeah, I don't think that's... I mean, I hope that answers your question, Wesley. Whenever I've played in a scenario where suddenly someone has a tool that I didn't really account for, then... I mean, sometimes I'm just like, well, screw it. They had the perfect answer, and honestly, that can make your player feel really good if they're like, what? My thing was the one thing that happened to work here. There was one time where I was playing in a game and there was a door that was magically sealed. And there were two potential options to get through the door. You could either dispel magic, or you could hit it with something silvered. And what happened in the game was my teammate, she was just like, okay, I'm just gonna blast through it. And it's like this special focus spell where she pulls a full Godzilla and just sprays in like a beam, and lo and behold, the damage type was silver, and she blasted straight through the door by pure accident. And it was such a cool moment, especially when the DM was like, you know, that was wild because there were two ways to get through that door, and you accidentally did one of them. Oh, okay. You saw someone advise with the module to read it cover to cover before even running it, and that feels excessive. Okay, I catch your drift. As far as that's concerned, I could see it in some ways. Like, sometimes there are certain modules where there's a twist, where maybe you have one of those turns where an ally suddenly turns, like an NPC ally, suddenly turns evil or something. And that's something that you'd want to know beforehand. But as far as reading the entire thing, I think there's an easier way. Because there are incredible communities online where you can find fellow DMs who talk about the module and talk about tips And I've gone to a lot of these where they'll say, okay, well, I ran this and this part feels clunky, so this is what I tried instead. But there are, in those groups, you can ask them, hey, I'm about to start running this. Are there any things that happen later on that, like any payoffs that I should be aware of earlier on in the session or earlier on in the game, just so I don't like accidentally kill someone who's supposed to be very important later? And they'll help. Like I there have been plenty of times where I've read through those just because sometimes the modules are super long. I'm running Rise of the Rune Lords and Adventure Path, where it's 6 books. 6 books, each book in the maybe 60, 70 page range. Don't quote me on that. I'm just ballparking based on my limited memory, but I've only read through 3 of them. And so far it's going all right, but I've gone to those forums, and thankfully I did, because when I first started running it, there were just some key things that I needed to keep track of from the very beginning that the first book doesn't tell you about at all. But because I went to those forums where people were talking about it, it gave me all the things I needed to prepare earlier. And if not like the exact thing, it would tell me like, okay, this thing is important. Look in the appendix of this book, this section, and it will tell you. So, as far as I'm concerned, I also don't think you need to read the whole module cover to cover before you run it. My shortcut is to find people who have run it, who can shed some light on this kind of thing. I will say I've made some mistakes. It has artifacts and things that are different every game. Make a note with every location, mark the overarching location so you knew where the item was. Fantastic! Perfect! And I dig that mechanic a lot. That's wonderful. I'll say, like, as far as accidentally killing an NPC that ends up being important, I've done that before. Oh, perfect. Yeah. I mean, I think you're already coming at it at the perfect angle. That sounds awesome, by the way. But yeah, there was one time where I had an NPC and I was just like, okay, I want the world to feel more dynamic. And so a moment came where the NPC just died. It felt right as far as like how the battle was going. And when that happened, like I had no idea at the moment. And the players were like, oh no, whoa. And it wasn't a very impactful moment. And then I read later on, oh shoot, they're supposed to do this thing. Like this NPC is supposed to help them with this thing. And in that case, I mean, you would have the opportunity to rely on your improv background of like, okay, this person, this important person was supposed to give them this thing. Because you're not a video game that has just the one static path where it's like, oh, you ruined this and now your save file is, you can't progress anymore. No, you can choose lots of different ways. Like maybe this NPC had, Rise of the Rune Lords is huge. I've only run people through about 3 books so far. I got 3 more to go. It's been a blast, too. I'm sorry the DM quit. It's been one of my favorites. Like, all my kid games are in Rise of the Rune Lords, and they've been loving it. for very distinctly different reasons. Like one of them was is like super enamored with all the fighting and all the espionage and like stealth attacks, and so that game is going very differently. Whereas the other game, they're about to perform for the mayor in this grand music acting performance, and this isn't in the book at all, but they wanted to do it, and it's been a delight so far. They've been killing it. I actually used, like, when I described the use of attitude with shopkeeps, that campaign was what I was thinking of, because all of them wanted to get like legit outfits. And so I was like, okay, what kind of outfit are you looking for and where are you going? And then I had them roll to see if they were able to find people who could get them such nice outfits. Oh, you're gonna... Oh, that's awesome! You're gonna run your daughters through the new 5e campaign. I saw that. That's the one with like the rabbit on the front, right? I think I'm remembering that correctly. But that sounds amazing, man. Goodness. Yeah, one of these days, I think, with how everything's going with like improv and streaming and all that, I would love to be able to even just stream like a game for you and Henry if he's game. I've been trying to set up more and more streams. It won't be like a very consistent weekly thing, but I think of it more of as like a one shot, and then we might continue with that one shot later. Or I mean, it could be in a different world with the same characters. The alternate cover, huh? I don't think I've seen that one. Okay, I'll take a look at that. Man. Oh, that's so cool. It's the blue, or like a jaguar? Is that what I'm looking at? That's what it looks like to me, but a live D&D like the Improv Against Humanity. Yeah, I dig it. I dig it. Dude, there's so many amazing games that have so many like cool ways to improvise, and like the structure, it all works so well over stream. So yeah, I'd be down. Cool. Well, at this point, we're about to hit the one hour mark, so I'm about to wrap up. Wesley, thank you so much for tuning in. A blank dog. Okay, I dig it. I really appreciate you tuning in and asking questions. It's really helped. Like, I wasn't sure how much material I'd be able to get out of like making characters instantaneously, so thanks for chatting. You're awesome, man. Cool. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. If you want to keep talking, shoot me a message on Facebook, Wesley. And for anyone else who's tuned in, I appreciate y'all watching. If you have any questions or comments or anything about the material, or about improv and D&D in general, please feel free to leave a message in the chat. I appreciate that, Wesley. It's a fairly new development, so I'm hoping to be able to build it up a bit. Just because I've been so lucky to have so many opportunities, and I just want to be able to give back a little bit if I can develop more of a following and just share everything I love. But yeah, for if anyone likes this content with the improv, with the D&D stuff, feel free to subscribe. I'll be pumping these out. I've got a few live streams on the way. Check out my channel, you'll see that they're upcoming. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and take care, everybody.